Martin Luther King Jr., original name Michael King Jr., was born January 15, 1929, in Atlanta, Georgia, U.S. Died April 4, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee. He was a Baptist minister and a social activist who led the civil rights movement in the United States from the mid-1950s until his death by assassination in 1968. His leadership was fundamental to that movement's success in ending the legal segregation of African Americans in the South and other parts of the United States. King rose to national prominence as head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which promoted nonviolent tactics, such as the massive March on Washington in 1963, to achieve civil rights. He assembled more than 200,000 people to whom he made his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. The march influenced the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And King was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. In 1965 he was criticized from within the civil rights movement for yielding to state troopers at a march in Selma, Alabama, and for failing in the effort to change Chicago's housing segregation policies. Thereafter he broadened his advocacy, addressing the plight of the poor of all races and opposing the Vietnam War. In 1968 he went to Memphis, Tennessee, to support a strike by sanitation workers. There on April 4, he was assassinated by James Earl Ray. Martin Luther King Jr. timeline. On January 15, 1929, Martin Luther King Jr. was born Michael King Jr. in Atlanta. His father is the pastor of the Ebenezer Baptist Church, a black congregation in Atlanta. His mother is Alberta Williams King, a former schoolteacher. In honor of the German religious reformer Martin Luther, the elder King later changes his name to Martin Luther King and his son's name to Martin Luther King Jr. in 1944. At age 15, King begins his freshman year at Morehouse College in Atlanta. He originally studies medicine and law but later decides to enter the ministry. In 1948-55, King graduated from Morehouse College in 1948 with a bachelor's degree in sociology. He spends the next 3 years at Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. It is here that he first learns about Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. Renowned for his public speaking skills, King is elected president of Crozer's student body, which is composed almost entirely of white students. He is the valedictorian of his class in 1951. King then attends graduate school at Boston University. In Boston, King meets Coretta Scott. They are married in 1953. The following year King becomes pastor of Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. He receives a Ph.D. in theology from Boston University in 1955. In December 1955, King is chosen to head the Montgomery Improvement Association, formed by the black community to lead a boycott of the segregated city buses. The boycott comes about after a black woman named Rosa Parks refused to give up her bus seat to a white man and was arrested. In response, King leads the Montgomery bus boycott. Late in 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court rules that segregation on buses is unconstitutional. In 1957, King and other activists, notably Bayard Rustin, establish a group later known as the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC. It is formed to help local organizations carry out civil rights activities in the South. In 1959, a visit to India gives King a long-awaited opportunity to study Gandhi's techniques of nonviolent protest. In 1960, King and his family moved to his native city of Atlanta, where he becomes co-pastor, with his father, of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. King devotes most of his time to the SCLC and the civil rights movement. On April 16, 1963, King writes what comes to be known as the Letter from Birmingham Jail. That spring, King had participated in a campaign in Birmingham, Alabama, to end segregation at lunch counters and in hiring practices. Police had turned dogs and fire hoses on the protesters, and King had been arrested along with a large number of his supporters. In the Birmingham jail, King writes an open letter to his fellow clergymen explaining his philosophy of nonviolence and why he would continue to protest. On August 28, 1963, the historic March on Washington takes place. The march is organized by King and other civil rights leaders. More than 200,000 people participate in the demonstration. Near the Lincoln Memorial, in Washington, D.C., King delivers his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. The march influences the subsequent passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. On October 14, 1964, King was announced as the winner of the Nobel Prize for Peace. On March 21 to 25, 1965, the historic Selma March, also called the Selma to Montgomery March, takes place. It is a political march from Selma, Alabama, to the state's capital, Montgomery. King leads the march as part of an effort to register black voters in the state. Demonstrators had twice attempted the march in the preceding weeks. On Sunday, March 7th, known as Bloody Sunday, they had been violently turned back by local police officers. 2 weeks after Bloody Sunday, as many as 25,000 people participate in the roughly 50-mile, 80-kilometer, march over 5 days. The Selma March and the events surrounding it become a symbol of the civil rights movement. The march leads directly to the passage of the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In 1966, King initiates a drive against racial discrimination in Chicago. On April 4, 1968, King was shot and killed while in Memphis, Tennessee, to support a strike by sanitation workers. In 1983, the U.S. Congress establishes Martin Luther King Jr. Day, in his honor, a national holiday to be celebrated annually on the third Monday in January.